The first thing Hannah Brooks noticed was the blood. It wasn't just on the gurney, it was on the floor, on the paramedic's gloves, smeared across the navy camouflage like a dark signature of war that had followed him home. 3 bullets. 1 collapsing lung. Fading pulse. And 30 seconds to decide whether she was brave enough to try. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet heroes who never make headlines, take a moment right now to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even in the darkest rooms, light can still fight back. Hannah was only 6 weeks into her first job as a registered nurse at a trauma center in Norfolk, Virginia. She had graduated near the top of her class, but nothing in nursing school had prepared her for the sound of a dying man trying to breathe through blood. The trauma doors burst open that night just after 2:17 a.m., and the ER was instantly alive with urgency. The paramedic shouted fragmented details: male, early 30s, Navy SEAL, found near an abandoned dockyard, multiple gunshot wounds, lost a lot of blood en route. His name was Jacob Mercer. Even unconscious, there was something resolute about him. His jaw was clenched as if refusing surrender. His hands were calloused, strong, scarred by years of service. Hannah felt her stomach tighten when she saw the entry wounds, 2 in his torso, 1 dangerously close to his collarbone. The attending surgeon was stuck in another emergency surgery across the hall. For the first critical minutes, it was on the ER team to stabilize him. "Prep for emergency extraction," the charge nurse ordered, eyes landing on Hannah. "Brooks, you're assisting." Her throat went dry. She nodded anyway. The room blurred into sharp, focused fragments, bright surgical lights, the metallic scent of blood, the relentless beeping of monitors. Hannah's hands trembled as she cut away fabric, exposing muscle torn by violence. She had assisted in procedures before, but never like this. Never when the patient's life was slipping through her fingers. The first bullet was lodged near his lower rib. The second had grazed his lung. The third was the worst, deep, near a major artery beneath his collarbone. They worked fast. Suction. Clamp. Pressure. Sweat trickled down Hannah's spine under her scrubs as she handled instruments with mechanical precision, whispering silent prayers she hadn't said since childhood. Jacob's pulse dipped dangerously low. The monitor let out a shrill warning that made her heart stutter. For a terrifying second, the line threatened to flatten. Hannah pressed harder, refusing to let fear win. She remembered her father's words when she'd told him she wanted to become a nurse: "If you're going to save lives, you have to believe they're worth saving, even when they can't fight for themselves." "Stay with us," she breathed, though he couldn't hear her. After what felt like hours but was barely 45 minutes, the surgeon finally rushed in to take over. By then, Hannah had helped remove 2 bullets. The third extraction was delicate and brutal all at once. When it was finally out, when the bleeding was controlled and his breathing stabilized with a ventilator's help, the room exhaled as one. He was alive. Hannah stepped back, gloves soaked, hands aching, chest tight with disbelief. She had just helped pull 3 bullets from a dying Navy SEAL. But the night was far from over. 2 hours later, just as dawn began to lighten the hospital windows, 2 men in dark suits walked into the nurses' station. They didn't wear uniforms, but the badges they flashed carried weight. Federal Bureau of Investigation. They asked for the nurse who had assisted in Jacob Mercer's emergency surgery. Hannah felt every pair of eyes turn toward her. Inside a small consultation room, the agents introduced themselves as Special Agent Thomas Reed and Special Agent Michael Alvarez. Their expressions were calm, but something in their posture felt urgent, almost tense. They didn't ask about the procedure. They asked one question. Did he say anything before he lost consciousness? Hannah blinked. She replayed the chaos in her mind. The gurney bursting through doors. The paramedic's voice. The blood. And then, yes. There had been something. Just before they sedated him, when his eyes had fluttered open for a split second, he had gripped her wrist with surprising strength. His lips moved, barely forming words. Tell them, not, inside. At the time, she thought he was delirious. She repeated the words to the agents. Tell them not inside. The two men exchanged a look that drained the color from the room. They thanked her, but the tension in their shoulders deepened. One of them asked if anyone else had been close enough to hear. Hannah shook her head. For the next 3 days, the hospital felt different. Security increased. Plainclothes officers lingered in hallways. Rumors swirled quietly among staff, but no one had answers. Jacob remained in critical but stable condition, heavily sedated. Hannah found herself visiting his room during her shifts, checking his vitals longer than necessary. She told herself it was professional responsibility. But deep down, it felt more personal. She had seen him at his weakest. She had held pressure against his wounds while his life slipped away. She felt tied to his survival. On the 4th day, he finally opened his eyes. They were steel gray, alert despite the pain. He couldn't speak much with the oxygen mask in place, but his gaze found hers as she adjusted his fore. Recognition flickered there. He squeezed her hand, weak but deliberate. Later that afternoon, the FBI returned. This time, they didn't pull Hannah aside. They went straight into Jacob's room. Hours passed before they emerged. When they did, their faces were grave but relieved. Word spread quietly among hospital administration, Jacob Mercer hadn't been shot in a random attack. He had uncovered a domestic terrorist cell planning to detonate explosives inside a crowded naval charity event in downtown Norfolk. The phrase he had forced out through blood and fading consciousness, "not inside," had been a warning. The device was meant for indoors. His team had been ambushed before they could report the final details. Because Hannah remembered those broken words, because she repeated them clearly, federal agents were able to intercept the suspects before the event took place. Hundreds of lives had been saved. Hannah struggled to process it. She had simply done her job. Listened. Paid attention. But sometimes listening changes everything. Weeks later, Jacob was strong enough to sit up unassisted. The scars across his chest were angry and permanent, reminders of how close he had come to never waking up. One quiet afternoon, when the hospital corridor was calm, he asked to see Hannah alone. He told her he remembered her voice cutting through the chaos. He remembered her telling him to stay. In a world where he had been trained to survive anything, it had been the steady compassion of a rookie nurse that anchored him back to life. He thanked her, not as a soldier to a civilian, but as one human being to another. Before he was discharged, the hospital held a small, private acknowledgement ceremony. No press. No cameras. Just a handful of staff and 2 federal agents who offered quiet words of gratitude. Hannah stood awkwardly in the back, wishing the attention would fade. She still felt like the same nervous nurse who had almost let her hands shake too much that first night. But something inside her had changed. She no longer doubted whether she belonged in that trauma room. She knew. Sometimes bravery doesn't look like charging into gunfire. Sometimes it looks like steady hands in fluorescent light. Sometimes it's remembering 3 broken words from a dying man and understanding they matter. Before we close this story, I want to ask you something special. Comment the word hope if you believe small acts of courage can change the world more than we realize. Jacob eventually returned to light duty, his career forever marked by that night. Hannah continued her shifts, still working long hours, still answering call lights and adjusting 4 lines. But now when fear crept in, she remembered the moment the monitor steadied. She remembered that life had chosen to stay. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that ordinary people can become extraordinary in a single moment, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that restore faith in humanity. Your support helps these stories reach others who might need hope today. Because sometimes, the difference between tragedy and salvation is one person who listens, and refuses to let go.